The ancient trees guarded their secrets, and the animals moved softly under the heavy canopy. The jungle had long been a place of shadows and murmurs. The evening was chilly and moist. The air smelled dirt and vegetation. A low mist spun between the trees, softly hazying out the earth. Within this vast territory, the tigers walked like ghosts, silent, strong, and sure in their rule. Leading the way over the forest, Kavi, the biggest of the tigers, had golden eyes that glowed faintly in the low moonlight coming through the thick undergrowth above. Walking, his muscles rippled under his striped coat. Every stride was intentional and calculated. The other tigers behind him sensed the faint rhythms of the evening. This was tranquility. This was home for them. But tonight something new permeated the atmosphere. A suspense. A silence that stimulated the senses and caused the hair on their backs of the necks to stand up. Kavi sensed it first. A weird hum so faint it might have been mistaken for the far-off buzz of insects. But it wasn't exactly like. It was deeper, more forceful, as if the jungle itself were vibrating with a power invisible. Tara, a ferocious tigress with silky black fur that blended with the darkness, moved up next to Kavi, her ears flickering. "Do you hear that?" she asked in a low growl, her voice slanted with doubt. She never challenged her instincts. They were screaming right now. Kavi nodded silently, his eyes narrowing as he looked out over the black horizon. The hum got louder, and with it grew a light, a single point of brilliance in the heavens that sank down from the heavens, becoming bigger and brighter. Like a spear, it cut across the night to provide harsh, unnatural illumination for the bush. Though there was nowhere to hide, the shadows twisted and extended as though they were trying to escape the incursion. "What is that?" Another tiger, a younger male called Raksha, murmured, his tail flickering uneasily. Now the light was too strong to ignore. The source became evident. Nothing earthly had ever seen, except from hovering above the jungle canopy. A large, sleek metallic craft with a moonlight glistening surface. Its surface alive with whirling patterns of light, it resembled a large silver disc hung in the air without obvious means of support. The hum had developed into a consistent, repetitive pulse, vibrating across the ground, into the woods, through the tigers themselves. Though his heart raced, Kavi stayed quiet. His body was tense and ready to act should needed. Still, his thoughts flew with inquiries. What was this object? Was it live? Was it merely a threat? The drone started to descend gently, its light brushing across the treetops. Once alive with the noises of insects, birds, and far-off screams, the jungle has grown totally silent. Even the breeze appeared to be breathing. From the tiniest insect to the biggest predator, everything was motionless, observing, waiting. Something much more unusual occurred as the vehicle descended toward the ground. From the ship's underside, a beam of light blasted out across the jungle, and the trees themselves appeared to quell beneath its strength. The light touch Kavi felt caused his world to tilt. His body started to twist and change, his sleek, powerful tiger body. Though far from pleasant, it was not suffering. His limbs opened out, his bones moving under his skin. His fur withdrew, his claws pulled back, and he sensed his spine straightening. In a few minutes he was no more a tiger stalking the underbrush. His body now human, he stood straight on two legs, although his mind was wild and acute. Still tuned to the jungle, his senses seemed different in this new form. His eyesight was clearer, his hearing more sensitive. But he was no more the person he had been. Tara and the others had experienced the same metamorphosis beside him. Though their tiger instincts still lingered within them, they stood as people now with hands, feet, and voices. Shock-stricken, they looked at one another, not sure what had just occurred. Above them, the spacecraft hung like an alien moon, throwing its light over the jungle. The air around them buzzed with an energy they could not explain. "How have they treated us?" Tara murmured, still sounding with the force and ferocity of her tiger form. Though human, her eyes radiated the carnivorous impulses of the jungle. Kavi shook his head, his brain faltering to match the changes his body had experienced. "I don't know," he snarled, his voice stronger than it had ever been, "but we have to find out." Kavi watched as they stood adjusting to their new forms. There was movement. Rising from the ship were tall, skinny aliens with silvery skin and extended limbs. Their faces were cold and emotionless, their eyes shone weakly in the dark. Their feet never appearing to touch the ground as they soared above the forest floor, they moved with a terrible grace. One of them brought up a gadget, sleek, metallic, and vibrantly humming. From it, a beam of light shot forward, hitting a bird sitting on the branches. The bird vanished in an instant, as though it had been deleted from the planet. Turning and repeating the process, the alien fired at different animals, monkeys, deer, even a huge crocodile hiding in the river. Every creature disappeared into thin air, drawn toward the unusual technology. "They're taking them," Tara whispered, her voice quiet but charged with rage. "They are pilfers, the animals." Kavi's hands closed into fists, his tiger instincts roaring within him. "They are not taken by us. Not without a struggle. How, though, could they fight something like this? These entities, these creatures from another planet, possessed abilities well beyond human comprehension. Now locked in these unusual human forms, the tigers were outmatched. Still, their habitat was the jungle, and they would not let it be stolen so readily. Tara stepped forward with taut muscles and burning eyes. "We have to know about their armaments. Maybe we could find a flaw if we understand their mechanisms." Kavi nodded, while his heart hammered in his chest. His head ran with all the possibilities, none of which were good. His voice solemn, he replied, "We cannot do this alone. The wolves, they will be able to assist. They are intelligent, and they also know the forest like we do." Tara sent him a stern glance. "The wolves will not trust us. Not at all like this." Though a sliver of uncertainty tore at him, Kavi answered with clarity, "They will. They have no option. Everybody is being taken by the aliens. Should we not battle together, the jungle will be empty by morning. Predators vying for territory and survival, the jungle species have always been adversaries." That was something different, though. This was a struggle for their very existence, not for supremacy. Kavi gazed up at the spacecraft, its lights like all-seeing eye sweeping over the woodland. Their territory was the forest, which would be lost permanently should they fail. Kavi turned and raced into the woods, his new human legs strange but strong, glancing one last at Tara. The others trailed behind him, their footsteps quiet, but their intent clear. Rising overhead, the spacecraft loomed with a terrible glare on the planet below. Kavi understood this was merely the beginning. The jungle shook in its light. Still to come was the actual battle. The buzz of the spacecraft trailed them across the trees, a continual reminder of the threat hovering above. Every shadow seemed alive with threat, every stir in the undergrowth indicating approaching catastrophe. Not only the aliens, but also the clock running down their survival was hunting them. Though the jungle seemed large, under the view of the spacecraft, it seemed small and exposed. And their thoughts ablaze with the stress of what lay ahead, the tigers turned humans raced across the darkness. Their territory had always been the jungle, but today it seemed like a battlefield, and they had limited time. The forest had always been alive with the murmur of the unseen, the voices of birds buried in the canopy, the rustle of small creatures scurrying through the underbrush, the whisper of the wind as it kissed the leaves. Now, though, things had changed beneath the frigid artificial illumination of the spacecraft hovering above. Something went wrong. Once vivid, the heart of the jungle now throbbed with anxiety. With their shallow but under-control breaths, Kavi and his friends rushed across the thick foliage while their minds struggled with the strangeness of their new shapes. From tiger to human, the change had been quick, unnaturally occurring. Their bodies, previously strong and animalistic, seemed alien. Their wild soul had not changed. Every stride they made in their human shapes seemed improper, as if their muscles recalled another way of movement. Kavi stumbled slightly on a root, his claws now fingernails, unable to hold the ground in the same manner. his chest heaving with annoyance. He did not slow down. Tara and the others kept pace behind him, their motions as reluctant but no less driven. The typical night sounds of the jungle were disappeared, sucked under the weight of the alien craft above. The planet below was unnaturally illuminated by the silver disk hovering in the heavens like a second moon. Its softness made the shadows under the trees dance with strange, unnatural forms, transforming the forest into something terrible and foreign. As Kavi guided his troop farther into the forest, toward the wolf zone, his heart hammered in his chest. The consciousness of the jungle itself, disturbed by the invaders, he could sense the strain in the air. Usually tall and proud, the trees seemed to bend under the weight of the spaceship's light, as though the very ground was withdrawing from the incursion. Kavi's keen eyes noticed flashes of movement near the margins of his sight as they fled. Shadows waved, forms flew between the trees. He doubted whether they were actual objects or merely illusions of the unusual light. Tonight the bush was ablaze with eyes, but it was unclear if they belonged friend or enemy. Tara said, "We're close," her breath coming in brief bursts. Her keen eyes swung left and right in search of hazards. "But the wolves will detect our alteration as well. They might not be eager listeners." "They'll listen," Kavi said with a growl. "Their options are none. The wolves will come second should the aliens occupy the forest." Tara squinted her eyes but said nothing more. She shared his awareness of the stakes. Each of them did. More species were disappearing every second that went by. They had seen the beams of light, the way the life simply disappeared from thin air. Kavi had no idea where they went following capture, but he could sense the wrongness of it, like the spirit of the jungle being sucked into a black hole. The air around them grew cooler as they advanced into the wolf area. The mist hanging low to the ground intensified and encircled their legs like fingers trying to draw them back. Kavi slowed down, his senses on full awareness. The wolves would not extend warm welcomes to them. In the jungle, wolves and tigers had always kept a careful equilibrium, respectful but apart, fearful of one another's might. A deep growl suddenly tore across the silence. Kavi stopped, pointing his hand for the rest to stop as well. His eyes peered among the trees in quest of the sound source. It was near, quite near. From the darkness sprang two shining eyes, then yet another, also another. The wolves came out of the mist one by one, their silver-gray fur mixing with the fog, and their gaze keen and deliberate. Their slim bodies tense with tension, they glided with the quiet grace of apex predators. Head was Valhalla, the alpha. His fur was mottled gray, silver-streaked from age and battle-scarred. Cold and smart, his eyes followed Kavi with the accuracy of a predator. "You should not have come here, tiger," Fenrir hissed, his deep rumbling seeming to pulse through the very air. Unlike Kavi's form, his stayed completely wolf, tall and commanding even with his slender body. "You no longer move among the jungle as one of its inhabitants." Kavi straightened and made his human body radiate the assurance of his tiger spirit. His voice firm. "We are still of the jungle, Fenrir," he continued. "Though not by will, we have transformed. The invaders are grabbing everything. Should we fail to battle united, nothing will remain." With his eyes darting over the group of tigers, Fenrir's face was unreadable. Around him, the wolves moved restlessly, their low growls a continual undercurrent. "Kavi, I have seen your sort. You have lost the thing that drives you to be here. You stand on two legs like those of the people who previously tried to control us." Tara stepped forward, her words cutting. "We still are wild, Fenrir. We have changed. Our allegiance to the woods has not. Should we wait, we will all be but ghosts in a dead forest." The obvious conflict between the two groups hung in the air like a thick mist. Every wolf could be staring at Kavi, observing and evaluating. He understood this was trust, not merely the partnership they required, and confidence among predators like them was brittle. It appeared for a moment as though the wolves might turn them away, leaving the tigers to fend for themselves. Then yet, something changed in Fenrir's eyes. He moved in closer, his eyes penetrating, his voice softer, but no less forceful. "I have seen the lights in the sky," he remarked gently. "I have heard the silence where life ought to be heard. The forest is not as it should be. We can also sense it." Relieved that the discussion had not, at least not yet, resulted in carnage, Kavi exhaled. "Then you understand we have to act. Teleporting animals, the aliens are capturing them on the ship. They are not stopping even though we have no idea where they are headed or what they want." With his lips curling in a growl, Fenrir showed sharp teeth shining in the low light. "We are not used to combat foes we cannot see or scent, but we will not allow the jungle taken." Restless behind Fenrir, the wolves listened to the talk with twitching ears. Though none totally trusted the other, Kavi could feel the intensity growing between the two groups, predators getting ready for war, on great alert in their instincts. Tara remarked, her voice accelerating, "We have scoured their ship. They cage the trapped animals out of light. We need to create a diversion, even though we believe we can break them out. Should the wolves be able to disturb their patrols, the tigers can release the inmates." The eyes of Valhalla closed deliberately. "And then?" "Then we strike," Kavi replied, his voice strong while uncertainty swirled in his gut. "Here in the jungle, we combat the aliens on our terms. Should they wish to claim this territory, they will have to pay for it." The only sound in the clearing for a long period was the faint rustle of leaves in the breeze. Then Fenrir nodded slowly, a sludging respect flickering in his eyes. "Very nicely, Tiger. We'll struggle, but the forest will remember you led us into this conflict should this fail." Kavi nodded. He gave those statements great weight. Two opportunities did not exist in the forest. Sunder turned and loped back into the mist without another word, his wolves silently trailing behind him. Built on need rather than trust, the union was precarious, but all they had. Heart racing in his chest, Kavi looked to Tara as the wolves vanished into the mist. "It begins." Tara's eyes gleamed with sharp will. "Then let's ensure it finishes in our advantage." The night was darker than it had ever been, the alien hum getting louder far away. The forest surrounding them shook softly, as though it too sensed the approaching tempest. The struggle for the jungle started now. As night sank in, the jungle lay in a thick, stifling quiet. The silence was broken just by the buzz of the alien spaceship, still floating above the canopy like a black moon. Its consistent pulse echoed over the woods, a continual reminder of the invasion from above. Below, in the shadow of the old forest, the defenders of the jungle got ready for an apparently insurmountable struggle. Kavi bent behind a big tree, staring out into darkness. The wolves had already dispersed, their sleek shapes vanishing into the underbrush, quiet and lethal. They would strike first, drawing the aliens into a false sense of security, therefore generating the turmoil required for the tigers to pass into the core of the alien spacecraft. Tension permeated the air, the sort that gave the jungle life with an electric charge. Tara, standing next to him, knelt on one knee, her eyes ablaze with the ferocious will of a predator. Even in human form, their tiger instincts stayed acute, primordial. Noted was every sound, every change in the air. Their home was the jungle, and they understood its rhythms better than anybody, or anything. But tonight, that understanding will be tested to the very last degree. Tara said, "Are you ready?" In a low but vibrantly energetic whisper. Kavi nodded, his muscles strained. "We are powerless. This is the only way." Ahead of them, the spacecraft loomed like a massive metallic beast, its brilliant light slicing across the night. The ship had arrived just beyond a clearing, its lower half buried in the ground as though it had descended into the center of the jungle. Periodically shooting from its sides, beams of light skim over the trees in search of movement. But the defenders of the jungle had evolved into shadows. A piercing howl cut through the air suddenly. Signing the start of the onslaught was Fenrir, the alpha wolf. As the rest of the wolf pack answered the cry, Kavi's heart hammered. Their howls, like battle cries, rang throughout the forest and made him shudder down his spine. From the shadows, the wolves moved in perfect harmony like ghosts. Their sleek bodies dashing amongst the trees, they avoided the beams of light as they attacked the alien ship's periphery. One of the wolves sprang at an alien, its fangs bared, as Kavi watched. The alien had little time to respond before the wolf tore into its gleaming skin. The alien let forth a mechanical, piercing scream, and in seconds the wolves arrived, their jaws snapping and tearing. The diversion proved successful. "Now!" Kavi snarled, his voice tight but focused. Their bodies low to the ground, he and the other tigers, still in human form, rolled quickly over the forest. The ramp of the ship was open, the harsh, synthetic light lighting her entrance. Exactly as they had intended, the wolves had attracted the alien sentries away from the ship, leaving the entryway unattended. Kavi set the example, his heart thumping with every stride. The ship was enormous, its weight far less than that of everything surrounding. Though it emanated light and energy, its smooth metallic surface was shockingly cold. His arms' hairs sprang up as the air around the ship buzzed with an odd static. This was something unearthly, something that did not belong here, not a place for earthly beings. Trying to overcome the discomfort, he tightened his hands. Their goals were clear-cut. They could not afford to second-guess. Tara grabbed a tiny gadget from the pouch fastened to her waist as they neared the slope. From the rubble of a long-gone human town, they had fashioned a rudimentary weapon. Though little, it would have to be sufficient. Tara said, "Cover me." Her words almost heard over the buzz of the spacecraft. Her fingertips gliding softly over the brilliant symbols, she started to play with the control panel of the ship. With his keen senses and every muscle in his body coiled like a spring, Kavi maintained watch. The wolves kept attacking behind them, swooping in and out of the trees to disorient the alien army. From unusual gadgets linked to their limbs, the aliens fired beams of light with odd, jerky accuracy. Still, the wolves were faster. Their familiarity with the ground gave them an advantage. For now. Kavi said, "Hurry!" his eyes darting frantically to the ship's entry. The panel hissed, then the door opened softly with a click to expose the ship's dimly illuminated inside. Tara arose, her face grimly determined. "We're in." Kavi nodded, pointing for the others to copy. Their feet muted by the unusual spongy floor, they slid inside the ship. The inside was as exotic as the outside, smooth mechanical walls devoid of any seams, flickering, pulsing lights that seemed alive. The deep, humid breath of the jungle outside was startling contrast to the heavy, sterile air indoors. Moving fast, they silently negotiated the little hallways. Kavi expected to see an alien every turn, but the ship was shockingly barren. He felt the tension chewing at him. It was too silent and quiet. The true threat, he realized, was waiting for them farther inside. At last they arrived in the center chamber, where the animals were housed. Kavi's blood ran cold when the door slid open with a quiet hiss. The walls were covered in rows of cages, each bursting with a wilderness species, all poised in shimmering beams of light, fixed in place as if time had stopped for them. Monkeys, birds, deer, even larger predators like crocodiles. Though their bodies were imprisoned in a stasis Kavi could not really understand, their eyes were open, brimming with fear. "They're alive," Tara said, her voice tinged with terror. "But they're frozen." Kavi had a flash of wrath in his chest. These species belonged in the jungle, his own. These aliens also lacked right to abduct them. His hands contracted into fists. "We release them. At now." Tara slid to the control panel, her fingertips speeding over the unusual brilliant symbols. The lights flashed, and one by one the cages started to let their inmates go. The creatures moved, perplexed, but alive, as the light beams darkened. Their triumph was temporary, though. The spacecraft rang with a loud, piercing alert, and the walls throbbed in red, furious light. Kavi whirled, his heart thumping. The aliens had picked them out. "Prepare," he snailed, his voice a deep murmur. The aliens arrived upon them in a wave, their bodies floating eerily precisely. Their silvery skin glistened in the crimson light, and their brilliant eyes fixated cold, mercilessly on the tigers. They raised their guns, fast succession of beams of light flying out. Kavi moved quickly. His body still moved naturally like a cat, even in human shape. He dived under a shaft of light, savagely growling at the closest alien. Though no longer claws, his hands were strong and he grabbed the alien by the throat and slammed it down. Tara battled beside him with similar passion, her motions vicious and erratic. The other tigers entered the fight, their human forms flowing with the same wild elegance they had known. The fight was fierce, chaotic, and terrible. Though the aliens were faster, stronger, and their technology far more advanced, the tigers battled with the raw, primordial fury of beasts protecting their territory. The creatures they had unleashed came to fight one by one. Hearing the alert, the wolves broke inside the spacecraft, their teeth flashing as they ripped into the alien ranks. The jungle itself looked to be rising against the invaders, as if the very soul of the ground had come alive. It felt as though they might win for a split second. Then, though, the spacecraft started to hum deeply and rumblingly. The floor underfoot started to vibrate as the walls shook. Kavi realized what was happening, and his eyes grew horrified. "The ship is launching!" Panic shot through the assembly. Everything would vanish once the ship sailed from the jungle. Tara's eyes gleamed with will. "We have to wipe it from inside out." Kavi nodded while his mind flew. Stopping the ship required locating its power core and disabling it before it could take flight. Kavi remarked, his voice tense with agitation. "We split up. Tara, take the others and keep battling. I will find the center." Heart thumping in his chest, Kavi turned and ran down the closest corridor without waiting for a reply. Though he didn't know their time span, he knew one thing for sure. The jungle will vanish should they fail. The ship hummed louder, the walls rippling with growing force. Kavi sprinted across the ship, his senses alert to the unusual pulse of energy coursed through the hull. At last he arrived in a big, round chamber. A big, brilliant sphere of energy floated in the middle of the room, crackling with raw force. This was the ship's heart. Kavi reached for a piece of metal from the floor without thinking and swung it with all his force at the core. The orb flickering furiously, the metal connected with a resounding thud. The ship shuttled and sparks flashed. The hum started to fade as the lights swung. Kavi stopped neither here nor there. He swung once again and once more, every blow weakening the core. The orb burst in a flash of light and energy with a last breaking blow, sending Kavi hurtling backward. As the ship started to fall in on itself, it let forth a horrific mechanical scream. Kavi staggered to his feet, his body hurting, then ran. Around him, bits of metal were falling to the earth, the ship disintegrating. Before the whole construction collapsed into the bush in a shower of sparks and rubble, he hardly made it to the exit. The wolves and tigers were still fighting outside, but as the ship sank, the surviving aliens started to withdraw, their army dispersing throughout the forest. The conflict was over. His chest heaving, Kavi fell to the ground and watched the ship burn. They were winners. At least temporarily, the jungle was safe. But Kavi couldn't get rid of the sense that this was only the beginning as he gazed around at the devastation and at the dead, both alien and jungle creature alike. Though the shadows still lurked, the jungle had survived. Outside the window, the scene was captivating, a whirl of blue and green so exquisite that it nearly didn't seem real. Eris's 7, where we are headed. Until a few decades ago, a planet was simply a dot in the vast emptiness. Now here we were, poised to write history. Breath fogging the icy surface, I drew closer to the glass and saw the far-off clouds twist and coil like veins of silver on the surface of the planet below. Though gorgeous, a knot of anxiety had crept into my chest and tightened every minute. It was something else, not the weight of the task or the wonder of the moment that held me. Something I could not quite identify. 30 minutes until landing, said Lieutenant Commander Hannah Ray, clear and professional over my headset. Her composed voice did not much help to lessen the discomfort slinking up my spine. I looked about the cabin, absorbing the rest of the staff. Strapped into the captain's chair, Commander Elena Vargas's countenance was stern as usual, showing no indication of the anxieties I would have expected she must be feeling. Before this one, she had completed innumerable missions. This was different. It was the unknown, not only the distance from Earth or the mission scope. Beside her, Dr. Asha Patel double-checked data for the 100th time, running her fingertips over the ship's console. Asha constantly wanted something to concentrate on, some figures to work on, to relax. For that I felt jealous of her. I had nothing to divert me from the gnawing awareness that something seemed strange. As we started down, the sound of the ship's engines got louder and vibrated underfoot under my boots. The cabin rocked with a flash of turbulence, and my fingers gripped on my seat straps. "Stabilizers engaged," Asher murmured to herself. "Everything looks nice." Still, it did not feel well. The cabin's temperature decreased ever so gently, although that could have simply been my anxieties. As we worked through the higher layers, I could sense the air outside the spacecraft thickening. Though the change was always difficult, something about this was unique, more violent. Then it dawned on me, an energy pulsating in waves across the ship from the air. Ever when we first set foot on the Earth, I had felt it like a low-frequency hum you could not exactly hear, but felt deep in your bones, and it grew stronger the more closely we got. When the ship jerked once more, stronger this time, I opened my lips to ask Asha if she could notice anything unusual in the readings. The above lights fluttered, then momentarily rang a warning alert before silence. What the devil was that? Hannah jerked, her hands flying over the controls. No idea. Asha answered with an abnormally tense voice. There is some sort of interference, but it is not derived from the atmosphere of the planet. That's outside. Almost similar. The ship slid sideways before she could finish, slamming me hard against the straps. My eyesight fogged, and for a minute all I could hear was the metal structure of the spacecraft groaning under pressure. Under their breath, someone cursed. Maybe I was the one cursing. I tried to slow down my breathing, but the irregular throbbing energy that had been so subtle before was now overpowering, giving the air itself a closing in about me feel. "Everyone, grab on." Elena's voice pierced the anarchy. She was yelling now, but even she sounded less assured than usual. The worst of it was that Commander Vargas never let her cool off. After a few more excruciating seconds, the ship settled, but the tension in the air did not relax. Though the environment was terrible, the unusual energy I had sensed before persisted in my skin, bones, even now. The globe itself seemed to be alive, noticing us. Await. Asha pressed a few buttons, her brow wrinkled with every second. Some kind of electromagnetic field is down there. It is throwing off our systems. I concentrated on the viewport and tried to ignore the tingling crawling across my skin. Now low enough for me to see the outlines of the ground below, just broken by jagged mountain ranges, piercing the skies like the bones of some old creature. The rich, verdant forests lay out underneath us like a blanket. Still, something didn't feel right. The ground seemed unspoiled, perfect even, overly perfect. Not one indication of erosion or mountain weathering. The earth seemed to have been fixed in time, unperturbed by the elements. It made me shudder down my spine. "We are approaching the landing site," Elena said, her voice firm once more. "Brace yourselves," says the ship groaned as the landing gear dropped, and we made contact with the ground with hiss of fleeing air. Everything paused for a second. The ship's engine's buzz vanished, and the sudden quiet was deafening. Then I heard it, the definite sound of feet, not mechanical nor metallic. Man. At least something close. Blinking, I tried to interpret the sound. Still, we were within the ship. Nobody could have made it to us so rapidly. "Did you find that?" I questioned, looking around at the others. Asha wrinkled, obviously listening for something. Elena's jaw clenched when Hannah's fingertips floated over her console. "I heard it too," Asha whispered gently, her eyes narrowing as she looked out the viewport. "Something out there?" "Something or someone?" Elena questioned. Asha mumbled, "I'm not sure." And it was then that I spotted them. Figures. walking among the woods. Tall, elegant, clearly human-like, but they possessed something otherworldly. Their feet almost touching the earth as they slid toward us. They moved as though they were not totally bound by gravity. Their skin was pale, somewhat luminous in the unusual light pouring through the upper dense canopy. Their long, flowing robes caught the faint glows of light from the trees as they moved. The crew collectively took a long breath. Not one of the settlers we had expected arrived. These were not even earthly people. Asha said, "They're coming," but the words hardly registered in my ear. My pulse accelerated, and a different type of stress enveloped me. One not formed of doubt or fear of the future, but of something far more basic, inherent. My hand reached for the clasp of my cuffs, poised to unbuckle, but I stopped. Looking at Elena, I waited for the directive. She skipped it. Frozen, her eyes fixed on the approaching figures. Hannah's voice sliced through the stillness. "They don't seem hostile." Still, she was mistaken. The figures stopped exactly at the edge of the woods when they arrived at the clearing. One of them moved forward and gently, deliberately raised her hand. I sensed a strange draw, as though her motion were influencing the very air we breathed. She then started speaking. She at least did. Her lips stayed still, but I could hear her words as precisely as if she had whispered them right into my ear. "You have to go. The males are unable to stay." The words rang true in my head, loaded with warning. Before another wave of energy, more robust this time, raced through the air, slamming into the spacecraft and rocking it down to its core, I had not even had time to process them. Elena's voice at last pulled me from my trance. "Everybody, keep cool. Nobody gets off the ship unless I command it." The numbers, though, were not waiting for her clearance. As they drew nearer, I understood then that this planet, which had appeared to be inviting from the security of space, was everything but safe. Not alone, and worse, we were not welcome. Not one of us moved for a brief instant, as though the weight of that quiet directive from the figures outside was crushing down on all of us. The air within the ship felt heavy, nearly suffocating. "You are going to have to go. The guys are not able to stay." Though no sound had traveled between us, the words nonetheless reverberated in my thoughts and startled in their clarity. I attempted to relax my breathing and unclench my fists, but the feeling that we had just crossed a line, one from which we could not turn back, pursed. The women, the figures, were still poised on the brink of the clearing, their eyes fixated on us with an intensity that felt like it was drilling through our ship. Though they were not moving, I could sense their repressive and relentless presence, as though the forest itself had come alive to see us. "Elena," Hannah's voice sliced through the quiet, low but forceful. "What are our expected responsibilities here? We cannot merely wait for them on the ship." "I know," Commander Vargas said, remaining fixed on the figures outside. She inhaled deeply then, gradually, unclipped her harness. "But we wait till we know what we are dealing with before acting. Not now. They have not assaulted us. Before we decide, we must know." Elena stood and moved toward the glass, her face invisible, but I could feel the strain in her posture. She was always the cool one, the level-headed leader who grounded us through any crisis. Still, this was not anything we had ever practiced for. There was no hostile environment or an ISS emergency here. After we had just landed on a planet we were meant to settle, we were being told, telepathically, that half of our crew wasn't welcome. "The men," I said under my breath, hardly able to keep my ideas consistent. "Why just the men?" "Because this isn't just a planet we're dealing with," Asha replied, her voice gentle but forceful. She was still seated, but her eyes became sharp, as though a jigsaw were breaking in her head. "Those women out there are not only some primitive civilization. They possess either powers or technology. Something more than what our knowledge permits. This planet is loaded with electromagnetic interference, telepathic communication. It is influencing everything." Elena looked at us, her voice low. "We do not become frantic. We follow policies. You watch the systems and remain aboard the ship, Dr. Patel." Hannah, grab command of the correspondence. Should something go wrong, we must be ready to get in touch with Earth right away. Her glance turned to me, a faint but definite sharpness to her words. And we are not leaving the men behind. The air surrounding us appeared to pulse, the odd energy I had sensed since arriving in the atmosphere now pulsating with increased intensity. It caused the little hairs on the back of my neck to stand on end, as though some invisible power was gently but purposefully slinking through the ship's walls in our direction. Though my heart raced, I discovered myself concentrating on the sound of my own breathing and pushing the rhythm to slow, even. Though I knew we were still formally shut off from whatever those women were capable of outside, I felt exposed here in the cabin of the ship. The odd sensation that the planet itself knew of our presence had gotten more intense. Once calm and full of promise, the rich green forest now felt like a complex trap just ready to spring. I looked at a movement out of the clearing. One of the women had advanced forward. Her dark hair fell in long waves down her back, her robe glittering like liquid starlight in the faint glare of the alien sun. She was taller than the rest. She raised her arm once again, her fingers dancing in a nearly friendly motion, but I could sense the pressure behind it, like an implicit threat. "Elena," I began, my voice tight. "She is doing it once more." Elena turned to face the viewport exactly as the woman whispered into our brains once more. "Women of Earth, you could remain, but the men have to go right now. None of you will live if they do not." Her words made me shiver. Though it was cloaked in beauty and tranquility, the threat of wrath was obvious now. I couldn't help but question what type of power they have over this world, what they could do to us should we reject them. From my chest, a frightened chuckle erupted, and I fast swallowed it down. This seemed unreal. Though we were ready for everything, atmospheric oddities, hostile surroundings, alien ecosystems. This? An ancient all-female society with telepathic communication ability and the boldness to demand we send half of our crew away? It seemed as though something from a dream. As Asha ran scans across the ship's controls with her fingers flying, her mood only darkened. The interference is growing more pronounced. Whatever field they are producing, it is disseminating. Should it maintain, it may undermine our systems, life support, communications, everything. "We cannot simply drop the men," Hannah remarked, her voice unusually high. "Scientists and engineers are among them. We survive here depending on them." Elena responded, "Which is exactly why they're not going anywhere." But her eyes now showed uncertainty, a reluctance I had not seen before. She was computing, weighing possibilities, looking for a fix free of crew division or violating the quiet danger hanging in the air. But the time was running out. I could see it. The air was charged with urgency, the way the figures outside moved slightly, their eyes never leaving the spacecraft. They were waiting for us to reply and move, and I realized that things would go terrible if we chose poorly. Rapid. "Elena," I continued, my voice faltering, "we need additional data. We must know their desired outcome. What then happens should we refuse?" Elena's jaw became tighter. "We'll discover." She headed to the airlock, her footsteps measured yet stiff, before any of us could stop her. Realizing what she was about to do, my heart skipped a beat in my breast. She was walking outside. By myself. I started, then Elena was already moving. "Elena, wait!" The cabin was filled with hiss of the airlock depressing, then she was walking outdoors into the clearing. My pulse hammering in my ears, I hurried to the window to see her. Outside, the woodland remained calm and unnaturally quiet. The figures stayed where they were, their faces blank as Elena walked up to them, but there was an intensity in the air, a quiet buzz of tension. "Elena," I mumbled, powerless. Right now, nothing we could do except watch. Her posture solid and her chin raised, she stopped a few feet from the lead woman. There was no movement, no sound for a minute, just the two of them standing there, caught in some quiet interaction. The woman then abruptly moved forward, her fingertips lightly stroking Elena's forehead. My hands clutching the console's edge, I gasped. She was doing? Elena did not flinch or move, but I could sense her muscles stiffening her body. Then the woman spoke once more. Her voice in my memory is distinct, yet her lips never moved. The planet belongs not to you. Never will. Elena answered nothing, but I could see the strain in her eyes as though she were battling something invisible. The woman's palm stayed on her forehead, and I could feel an odd pulse of energy rippling through the air like an invisible current stranding the fabric of reality itself. I murmured once more, "Elena," but the weight of the moment swallowed my voice. Then the woman withdrew her hand, and the unusual energy vanished, leaving the air calm and frigid, quite as abruptly as it had started. Elena staggered back with pale cheeks and ragged breathing. She turned, her eyes fixed on mine through the windshield, and in that instant, I saw something I had never seen in her: fear. She moved toward the ship, but the commander shouted once more, her voice resonating in our brains like a last warning. "The men have to go. This planet will eat you all." Elena said nothing as she returned to the airlock, but her ghostly gaze revealed all I needed to know. She was changed from all she had gone through outside, and today the weight of the choice rested more on us than it had ever done. Standing just inside the airlock, Elena was pallid under the fluorescent lights and had stiff shoulders. Though she was working to control it, I could still see the terror carved in her eyes. My pulse thumping in my chest, I waited for her to say something, anything, that would provide us direction, clarity, a strategy. But the silence enveloped us, dense and stifling, as though the oxygen in the air was gradually running empty. "Elena," I said, my voice stiff and weak, but it was like speaking in a vacuum. "What happened out there?" She didn't answer for a very long moment. Her eyes darted to me, then to the window, where the Stardust Sisterhood figures still stood observing us. Their attitude had not altered. They had not moved. Like we were, they were waiting. But their silence suddenly seemed sinister, as if they were waiting for us to fail. At last, Elena let out a deep, wobbly breath and slumped against the wall, her hands clutching the console's edge as though it were the only thing keeping her straight. "They handed us a choice," she added, her voice strained. "Still, it is not truly a decision at all." I choked hard, staring at Asha, who was keeping an eye on the systems, her face pulled and stiff. Ready to emit a distress signal should things go south, Hannah's fingers floated over the communications panel. Unaware of the whole degree of the danger we were in, the guys of the crew were down in the cargo hold. They were unaware that their very existence on this planet constituted a threat, a transgression. "What do they desire?" Though I already knew the answer, I asked. The message had been shockingly unambiguous. Elena's eyes became steely, yet I could see the conflict tearing at her. "They want the men out of sight. Should we fail to send them abroad, they will act." Though I'm not sure what, she touched me and I sensed it. This planet is alive and relates to them. They manage it in some capacity. Should we stay? Should the men stay? It will react. Her comments hung in the air, a bleak certainty coating us. Every second tightened the knot that developed in my stomach. From the start, the men, scientists, engineers, vital to the success of the colonizing effort, have been part of the mission. These days, though, they were a liability, and we were having to make an impossible choice. "How are we sure they will honor their word?" Hannah asked, her voice barely steady. "What if we send the men away and they still determine we pose a threat? They could be simply purchasing time." Elena clearly frustrated herself as she pushed her fingers to her temples. "We're not sure. I do know, though, that the Earth is reacting to them. It transcends the sisterhood as well. Everything is here. Everything connects with them: the air, the ground, the environment. We run danger if we continue to live like this, with the guys." A terrible, gnawing anxiety crept into my chest. To be leaving half of our team, our friends, our colleagues, felt like betrayal. Unquestionably, though, the planet had influence. The electromagnetic disruptions, the odd energy pouring through the Earth, the way the air itself seemed to alter when the sisterhood talked. Everything was building toward something, and it felt as though we were on the brink of calamity, one erroneous step away. I whispered softly, looking at Elena. "What are we supposed to do?" Her face relaxed momentarily, the weight of control pressing down on her. She then deepened her breath, straightening and squared her shoulders, the sharpness in her voice returning. "We will grant them their preferred choice. The guys will be returned to the ship. After we get them in orbit, we will decide what to do going forward." Having been quiet up until now, Asha spoke gently. "What if they balk at leaving?" "They will want to stay. They will not simply abandon us." Elena answered in a forceful voice. "They don't get a choice. Either this or we all die. I won't jeopardize everyone just to keep the line intact. We decided upon this. There was no more debate. Though the air around us seemed to be thick with uncertainty, Elena's will remained unbending. The clock was running out, and I had no doubt the planet itself would choose for us if we delayed action. The following hour went in a frantic haze as we got ready to return the guys to the ship that had brought us to Era 7. Though bewildered, enraged even, Elena's power left little opportunity for debate. She informed them it was a temporary evacuation, a safety precaution until we could get in touch with Earth and sort out the truth from the fiction. They had no need of the whole truth. Not now. I felt the weight of every step they took as they got on the transfer shuttle, as though we were sealing our doom. Though the Stardust Sisterhood had not moved, I could sense their presence at the back of my mind, like pressure rising there, getting more intense with every second. "Do you consider this sufficient?" Her voice hardly audible above the shuttle's engine hum, as Asha questioned. "I have no idea," I said. "Nonetheless, I hope so." The engines fired to life as the shuttle's doors closed with a hiss. Watching the men's faces through the little porthole windows, my heart hammered as their expressions combined uncertainty, frustration, and terror. For years we had worked side by side and trained together. We were now shipping them away, maybe permanently. The spacecraft lifted off, a dust plume whirling beneath it as it shot skyward. I held my breath and watched it rise till it was just a dot against the strange sky. Everything stopped for a split second, and then the earth underfoot started to shake. It began as a weak vibration, hardly noticeable at first, but it soon got stronger. The trees all around moved, their leaves rustling in the unusual wind that appeared to originate nowhere. The two suns of Era 7's clouded, warm, golden light faded into a sinister gray. "What's happening here?" Grasping the console's edge, Hannah yelled as the shakes got stronger. Asha tried to make sense of the data coming in by flying her hands over the control panel. She exclaimed, her voice taut with dread, "It's the planet. The seismic activity is off the charts. Something's—" A deafening crack sounded before she could finish, and the ground opened a few meters from the spacecraft. A jagged crack tore across the ground, and from the depths below a wave of heat shot forth, almost knocking us off our feet. "Elena!" I yelled, but she was already moving, her eyes wild with will. "They're testing us," she cried above the planet's wrath. "We have to demonstrate our compliance for them." Still, I knew it was more than a test when the ground kept shaking. The Sisterhood had no intention of this serving as a warning. This was the start of much worse. The air suddenly hummed with an odd, resonant buzz, the same energy I had sensed since we first touched down, but now magnified to a terrible degree. The Stardust Sisterhood's figures started to shine, their forms flickering like heat waves as they approached us, their eyes ablaze with a force that made my blood stop cold. "Elena, we have to leave here," I yelled, yet the words felt useless. Then one of the women lifted her hand without warning, and the hum turned into a thunderous roar. Like a physical force, I felt a wave of power go through the air, striking into me. I staggered, trying to keep straight as the ground shook underfoot. "Elizabeth!" She was already sprinting toward them as I yelled once more. Everything appeared to slow at that same instant. I watched, powerless, as Elena went to the Sisterhood's leader, her eyes full of despair, rebellion, and, most sadly, acceptance. She was going to put herself last. I understood this. She had decided the instant she emerged from the airlock. "Not Elena, not!" I gasped, but it was too late. The Sisterhood's leader stretched out and once again brushed Elena's forehead with her palm. Elena vanished the next thing I knew, after a dazzling burst of light. Vanishes, as though she had never lived. The vibrations ceased. The air went quiet as the ground's fractures sealed themselves as rapidly as they had first shown. The Stardust Sisterhood turned, their eyes fading back to their cold, unfeeling looks, and they vanished silently into the forest. We were solitary, and Elena had vanished. Days later, wondering whether we had ever had a chance, as I sat aboard the silent ship, gazing out at the alien terrain. Hope and a fantasy of a fresh start for mankind drove us to Eris 7. But we were not to inherit this world. It belonged to the Sisterhood, to something far ancient and more potent than we could possibly know. Elena had given her last sacrifice to shield us and offer us chances to survive. Still, at what cost? I was unsure whether we would ever be able to leave this location, or if we should at all. Eris 7 was obviously not a fresh start, though. This was the end.